All right. Well, it looks like we're having trouble with the getting the transcript going. There's Roy and Dee. So before we get started, let's have a word of prayer. Father, we thank you for bringing us back together today on this Sabbath, which is also in the middle of Unleavened Bread Week, the Passover week. And we just thank you for all that you're going to teach us today. Please open our hearts, our eyes, and our ears, and our minds to receive all that you have for us in Yeshua's name. Amen. So today is Passover Shabbat Kol HaMoed. It's the special Sabbath that happens in the middle of the Passover unleavened bread week. And we're just going to read those scriptures, which is Exodus 33, starting at verse 12, to chapter 34, verse 26. The Haftarah for this week is Ezekiel 37, verses 1 to 14. And the Brit Hadashah, or New Testament, is John 20, verses 1 through 14. So I will start, and then Michael will read after me, and then we'll go around this room. So at Exodus 33:12, Moses said to Yahweh, "Behold, you tell me, bring up this people, and you haven't let me know whom you will send with me. Yet you have said, I know you by name, and you have also found favor in my sight. Now therefore, if I have found favor in your sight, please show me now your way, that I may know you, so that I may find favor in your sight, and consider that this nation is your people." He said, "My presence will go with you, and I will give you rest." And he said to him, "If your presence doesn't go with me, don't carry us up from here. For how will people know that I have found favor in your sight, I and your people? Isn't it that you go with us, so that we are separated, I and your people, from all the people who are on the surface of the earth?" Yahweh said to Moses, "I will do this thing also that you have spoken, for you have found favor in my sight, and I know you by name." He said, "Please show me your glory." And he said, "I will make all my goodness pass before you, and will proclaim Yahweh's name before you. I will be gracious to whom I will be gracious, and I will show mercy on whom I will show mercy." And he said, "You cannot see my face, for man may not see me and live." Yahweh also said, "Behold, there is a place by me, and you shall stand on the rock. It will happen, when my glory passes by, that I will put you in a cleft of the rock, and will cover you with my hand until I have passed by. Then I will take away my hand, and you will see my back, but my face shall not be seen." Michael, read verses 1 through 10 of chapter 34, please.
Yahweh said to Moses, "Chisel 2 stone tablets like the first. I will write on the tablets the words that were on the first tablets, which you broke. Be ready by the morning, and come up in the morning to Mount Sinai, and present yourself there to me on the top of the mountain. No one shall come on with you or be seen anywhere on the mountain. Do not let the flocks on herds graze in front of that mountain." He chiseled 2 tablets of stone like the first, and Moses rose up early in the morning and went up to Mount Sinai as Yahweh had commanded him, and took in his hand 2 stone tablets. Yahweh descended in the cloud and stood up with him there, and proclaimed Yahweh's name. Yahweh passed by before him and proclaimed, "Yahweh, Yahweh, a merciful and graceful God, slow to anger and abundant in loving kindness and truth, keeping loving kindness for thousands, forgiving iniquity and disobedience and sin, and who will by no means clear the guilty, visiting the iniquity of the fathers on the children and on the children's children, on the third and on the fourth generation. Moses hurried and bowed his head toward the earth and worshiped. He said, I have found favor in your sight, and Lord, please let the Lord go among us. This is a gift, naked people. Pardon our iniquity and our sin, and take use for your inheritance.
One more verse, verse 10.
He said, behold, I make a covenant before all your people. I will do marvels such as have not been worked in all the earth, nor in any nation, and all the people among which you are shall see the word of Yahweh, for it is an awesome thing that I do with you.
Thank you. Okay, Dawn, verses 11 through 20, please.
Mind all the things that I command you. Look, I am casting out from before you the Amorite, the Canaanite, the Hittite, the Perizzite, the Hivite, the Girgasite, and the Lebusite. Mind yourself, lest you make a covenant with those dwelling in the land that you are entering into, lest it become a stumbling block for you. Their altars you shall tear down, and their stels you shall break, and their groves you shall cut down, and the cast images of their gods you shall burn with fire, for you shall not do worship before another God. For Yahweh your Elohim is a jealous God, lest you make a covenant with those dwelling on the land, and they go fornicating after their gods, and they sacrifice to their gods, and invite you, and you should eat their sacrifices, and you should take from their daughters for your sons, and from your daughters you should give to their sons, and your daughters go fornicating after their gods, and they lead your sons to fornicate after their gods. And you shall not make for yourself molten gods, and the feast of unleavened bread you shall keep. 7 days you shall eat unleavened bread, according as I have commanded you, during the time in the month of new things. For in the month of the new things you came out of Egypt. All that opens the womb, the males, are mine, firstborn of a cow and firstborn of a sheep. And you shall redeem the firstborn of a draft animal with a sheep. Now if you do not redeem it, you shall give a price. Every firstborn of your sons you shall redeem. You shall not appear before me empty-handed.
Thank you. Julianne, 21 through 30, please.
6 days you shall work, but on the seventh day you shall rest in plowing time, and in harvest you shall rest. And you shall observe the feast of weeks, of the first fruits of wheat harvest, and the feast of ingathering at the year's end. 3 times in the year all your men shall appear before the Lord God of Israel. For I will cast out the nations before you, and enlarge your borders. Neither will any man covet your land when you go up to appear before the Lord your God 3 times in the year. You shall not offer the blood of my sacrifice with leaven, nor shall the sacrifice of the feast of the Passover be left until morning. The first of the firstfruits of your land you shall bring to the house of the Lord your God. You shall not boil a young goat in its mother's milk. Then the Lord said to Moses, write these words, for according to the tenor of these words, I have made a covenant with you and with Israel. So he was there with the Lord 40 days and 40 nights. He neither ate bread nor drank water, and he wrote on the tablets the words of the covenant, the 10 Commandments. Now it was so when Moses came down from Mount Sinai, and the 2 tablets of testimony were in Moses' hands when he came down from the mountain, that Moses did not know that the skin of his face shone while he talked with him. So when Aaron and all the children of Israel saw Moses, behold, the skin of his face shone, and they were afraid to come near him.
Thank you. Okay, and now, John, we're going to go to Ezekiel chapter 37. And would you just read through verse 14, please? 1 through 14.
Sure. The hand of the Lord was on me, and he brought me out by the Spirit of the Lord, and set me in the middle of a valley. It was full of bones. He led me back and forth among them, and I saw a great many bones on the floor of the valley, bones that were very dry. He asked me, Son of man, can these bones live? I said, Sovereign Lord, you alone know. Then he said to me, Prophesy to these bones and say to them, Dry bones, hear the word of the Lord. This is what the Spirit and Sovereign Lord says to these bones. I will make breath enter you, and you will come to life. I will attach tendons to you and make flesh come upon you, and cover you with skin. I will put breath in you, and you will come to life. Then you will know that I am the Lord. So I prophesied as I was commanded. And as I was prophesying, there was a noise, a rattling sound, and the bones came together, bone to bone. I looked, and tendons and flesh appeared on them, and skin covered them, but there was no breath in them. Then he said to me, Prophesy to the breath. Prophesy, Son of Man, and say to it, This is what the Sovereign Lord says. Come, breath from the four winds, and breathe into these slain, that they may live. So I prophesied as he commanded me, and breath entered them, and they came to life, and stood up on their feet, a vast army. Then he said to me, Son of man, these bones are the people of Israel. They say, Our bones are dried up, and our hope is gone. We are cut off. Therefore prophesy and say to them, This is what the Sovereign Lord says. My people, I am going to open your graves and bring you up from them. I will bring you back to the land of Israel. Then you, my people, will know that I am the Lord, when I open your graves and bring you up from them. I will put my spirit in you, and you will live, and I will settle you in your own land. Then you will know that I, the Lord, have spoken, and I have done it, declares the Lord.
Thank you. Okay, and now Roy and Dee, the Brit Hadashah is John chapter 20, verses 1 through 14, and so you can split that between yourselves. Roy and Dee.
Sorry, just a second. Okay, here we are. Do 1 through 7.
Okay. Now, on the first day of the week, Mary Magdalene went early while it was still dark to the tomb and saw the stone taken away from the tomb. Therefore, she ran and came to Simon Peter and to the other disciple whom Jesus loved, and said to them, "They have taken away the Lord out of the tomb, and we don't know where they have laid him." Therefore Peter and the other disciple went out, and they went toward the tomb. They both ran together. The other disciple outran Peter and came to the tomb first. Stopping and looking in, he saw the linen cloths lying, yet he didn't enter in. Then Simon Peter came following him and entered into the tomb. He saw the linen cloths lying, and the cloth that had been on his head, not lying with the linen cloths, both rolled up in a place by itself.
So then the other disciple who came first to the tomb also entered in, and he saw and believed. For as yet they didn't know the scripture that he must rise from the dead. So the disciples went away again to their own homes. But Mary was standing outside at the tomb weeping. So as she wept, she stooped and looked into the tomb. And she saw two angels in white sitting, one at the head and one at the feet, where the body of Jesus had lain. They asked her, "Woman, why are you weeping?" She said to them, "Because they've taken away my Lord, and I don't know where they have laid him." When she had said this, she turned around and saw Jesus standing and didn't know that it was Jesus.
Thank you. Well, that John chapter 20, 1 through 14 is just so powerful. It brings tears to my eyes for her. Anyway, I don't want to get sappy, but I do want to fix my screen here so that I can present the teaching. If y'all will just give me a couple of seconds, and then I will be able to share the screen, and I need to turn on this recording. And so I'm going to go back to the Word document. And then I'm going to go to WebEx and share my Microsoft Word. And it says I'm sharing. I hope everyone can see that. And then I will start the recording. So we
Is it
okay,
just
I
me,
hope
or
I'm
can
reconnected.
Oh, there you go.
Right. For some reason, I lost my internet connection. You know, probably I'm a conspiracy theorist, you know, so probably that was a work of the enemy. Okay, let's commence. So I guess that means, because Dawn, you mentioned seeing the map, that you can see the screen. And so, Father, we thank you for this teaching. Thank you for all that you give to us to understand. Please let these be your words and not my words. Your word is the only word that counts. My words count for nothing. So let your words flourish and bloom and multiply and bring forth good fruit. And let my words die by the wayside. In Yeshua's name, amen. I've titled this teaching, "The U.S., Israel, and the King of the North." And I start by saying that examining the history of the Seleucid and Ptolemaic empires is a daunting task. And I've heard that from other people as well, that it's a daunting task here in Daniel 11 to study this, because you have to do it in light of the history that's already happened. But it can be simplified, and it's for the purpose of seeing the patterns that Yahweh has laid out for us in the end of days. What we are witnessing right now with the U.S. and Israel rising up is the king of the south. And who is the king of the south? Egypt and the U.S. and Israel. I'm going to explain how that is possible. The king of the south is now provoking the heretofore, at least for the last 2,300 years, unseen or unrecognized king of the north, Iran. In other words, what I'm trying to say there is, people haven't recognized who is the king of the north and who is the king of the south. But it's time for us to recognize those. So I want to explain about the designation of the king of the south and of the north. And it is always in relation to Judea, Israel. That was in the center between the two kings, and which caught Israel in their battles until finally Antiochus IV came, who not only caught Israel in battle, but came to specifically destroy Israel. And so I'll give you more on that later. But let's look at this map. I want you to notice that we have here the Seleucid Empire, which I've tried to circle, but I didn't want to draw my own circle. But you can see that kind of aqua colored section there where my mouse is going back and forth, that's all Seleucid Empire. And the Ptolemaic Empire is down here in the gold color. It's circled. You can see that. And it kind of goes east to west. Seleucid Empire goes east to west. And then you have Israel circled in black here. You can see that these two empires, and I'm going to bring this up again, these two empires, when they were at war with each other, they had to trudge through Israel to get to the Ptolemaic kingdom, and the Ptolemaic kingdom had to trudge through Israel to get to the Seleucid Empire. And so Israel was caught between them. Yet Israel was not greatly affected by their wars necessarily. What affected Israel was the what I'm going to term now the Greekization, the Hellenization of Israel. And so that played a part. And so I'll go into more details with this. By the way, I just want to tell you that the historians called these wars between the Seleucids and Ptolemies, they just call it the Syrian Wars for convenience. Why? Because see here where my mouse is roaming around there on the screen, there's Syria right there. And, they have to trudge through Syria and they have to trudge through Israel. And historians generally don't like to recognize Israel for much. So, they just called it the Syrian Wars when they're speaking of this chapter 11 in Daniel. So, as I've shown you, the Seleucid territory, which is north of Israel, again, here, look at that big aqua-colored territory, that runs east and west. And then we have the Ptolemaic kingdom, which runs east and west, and then it kind of goes south, but it's generally the same direction, east and west. And so that helps us to understand why Israel was trapped in this time period. Now, I have been told that the kings of the north and south must lie directly north and south of Israel. So now you see, here's Israel. So the assumption when somebody tells me that is that the Seleucid Empire isn't it. And what they're telling me is that the king of the north must be Europe, because it lies directly north of Israel. That somehow, in the book of Daniel, chapter 11, these two empires, which the chapter mentions repeatedly, has changed, because they no longer exist. You know, the Seleucids and Ptolemaic empires no longer exist, according to this logic. And therefore, the end times king of the north will be Europe. And I've not heard a very good explanation of who the king of the south is in the end times, according to this logic, because this logic leaves no viable king of the south. There's no country directly south of Israel that has the ability to rise up even against Europe. So the idea that the kings of the north and south must lie both, directly north and south of Israel is nonsense. Not only geographically, but politically as well, because we know who the players are today, right? Yahweh was talking about huge empires that were to the north of, like northward, and the south of, like southward, kind of like when he says that he built a garden eastward. It is not directly east necessarily, though it could have been, but it was eastward. It was in the general directional sense. Both of those empires extend east and west. So this is important for us to understand who today's kings of the north and south are. And right now, the world is witnessing I don't know why I put the number 2 there. The world is witnessing the resurgence of two ancient factions, and I'll explain why this is so as we go. Those two ancient factions are the Seleucids and Ptolemies, and they are fighting over control of Jerusalem now. We're gonna see in Daniel 11 that fighting over Jerusalem wasn't the main context of the Seleucids and Ptolemies until Antiochus IV came along. But now it is the point, and that happened starting with Antiochus IV. And by the way, before we get going a little more, I've got a place marked here where if you happen to fall asleep in this chapter where I'm giving you some brief histories, if you fall asleep because you're bored, just know that when we come to Daniel 11:24, I'm going to wake you up. I'm going to say, now is the time to pay attention. But so I just want you to know that now the factions, the Seleucids and Ptolemies, are arising because those north and south kings are part of them. So I said here, but wait, the Seleucids and Ptolemies no longer exist. So how are we watching the Seleucids and Ptolemies fighting? Well, the entire chapter of Daniel 11 is entirely about the Seleucid and Ptolemaic empires fighting with each other, including the last section, Daniel 40 to 45, which affects us today. They are called the kings of the south and the north. So this same attribution of kings of the south and north comes to us from Yahweh all the way to the end of days. In the still unfulfilled verses of Daniel 11, verses 40 to 45. He uses the exact same terminology for our time, the end of days. Why? It's because he wants us to recognize the patterns from the three prior kings of the south and north, and we are to know through that where we are in the timeline of the tribulation and Yeshua's return. You know, he gives us many patterns. Now, the prophecies in Daniel 11 or even elsewhere are not so much about their origins and their names, as are the patterns that these warring factions set up, and which patterns will happen one more time during the tribulation. You know, names are just names. It is the actions of the descendants of Jacob's enemies that count, no matter what their modern names are. And let me give you an example. We have Elam, who later became Persia, who later became Iran. These are the same areas and the same people over a period of 4,000 years. Well, the Ptolemies and Seleucids, which were introduced to the world stage about 2,300 years ago, are the same Greek people, still trying to rule Egypt as the king of the south, that's south of Israel, and the area north of Israel, which is the king of the north today. So the names have changed, but you know, time is the enemy of names. Changed names do not erase the players. Time only obscures our understanding of who they are because most people are not willing to dig. They're not willing to dig into the scriptures and do what Isaiah said, which was go back to the beginning. You want to understand what's happening now, go back. Then you'll understand. Because the names change. The names were changing even during the time of the Old Testament. It's why people don't understand that when Ezekiel is talking about Lydia, it later became Turkey, they don't know that's the same territory, that's the same area. Now, here's an important thing. If you're just reading Daniel 11, you're thinking, and if you're like me anyway, here's what I was thinking. Why do we have this prophecy? What is the reason for, couldn't the Lord just say that somebody would attack from the north? And, you know, why have, you know, all these 45 verses of history that doesn't apply to us? And then he said to me, well, it's not just for the end of days. And I went, oh, it was prophecy for the interim period of about 400 years when the Jews had returned from Babylon and would be facing their enemies with no prophets around to tell them what was happening. You know, there were no prophets during that period to bring Yahweh's messages to them. So in the end of days, it will still be the king of the south, which today now includes Israel, who will provoke the king of the north. You know, I'm going to explain why that's a little different configuration of the king of the south. I'll explain that a little bit later on. But it is in this way that the final prophecy of Daniel 11 is different, because it does include Israel. And it includes a nation that Daniel had never heard of. That's the U.S. Now, I want you to understand something. An angel appeared to Daniel in chapter 10 to introduce the vision Daniel would describe in chapter 11. But before the angel told Daniel the vision, he also explained the 21 days of fighting the prince of the kingdom of Persia in order to get to Daniel. So basically, we should be reading Daniel 10 and 11 together as one episode. I'm not going to read Daniel 10. It'll take too long, but you can go read Daniel 10 and his encounter with that angel. Instead, we're going to go to chapter 11. And here's where it might start to get boring for you if you're not a history student. It wasn't boring for me because I love history, but some people don't. So if you fall asleep in here, don't worry about it. I'll wake you up at Daniel 11:24. Daniel 11:1. As for me, in the first year of Darius the Mede, I stood up to confirm and strengthen him. Now, this prophecy here, starting in Daniel 11:1 and through the whole chapter, expands on what the Lord said in Daniel 8:1 through 14. That's the chapter prophesying about the rise of Alexander the Great, which is called the Great Horn. And it also prophesies about the 4 generals who would rule his empire after he was dead. So the Lord is expanding on what he said. Just like, the Lord gave us the book of Revelation to expand what he said on Matthew 24. So he's giving more details here. Now, as far as who it was that stirred up to confirm and strengthen him, it is not certain whether that was Daniel or the angel who stood to confirm and strengthen Darius as king of Babylon. Verse 2, now I will show you the truth. Behold, 3 more kings will stand up in Persia, and the 4th will be far richer than all of them. And when he has grown strong through his riches, he will stir up all against the realm of Greece. Now, this is Xerxes, who is also Ahasuerus, the Purim king, the Queen Esther king. He was the last of the Persian kings. And it was during this time in Persia's history where that country had the greatest riches, but it was being weakened politically. So Persia was rich and it existed, but it had become weak. This is the place where America is now, isn't it? So this element here applies to us now in the end of days, especially since Trump and Netanyahu have decided to fulfill Daniel 11:40 and provoke Iran, the remnant of ancient Persia, and now both of them are in weakened positions, are they not? So we can see that this element is an element that's being fulfilled today. But it has already been fulfilled with Xerxes or Ahasuerus. Daniel 11:3. A mighty king will stand up who will rule with great dominion and do according to his will. So this was the great horn from Greece, the Edomite goat. For those who understand that Greece is associated with Esau and the Edomites, who destroyed the Persian Empire, the ram. And that person was named Alexander the Great in history. Verse 4, when he stands up, his kingdom will be broken and will be divided toward the 4 winds of the sky, but not to his posterity. In other words, not to his sons, nor according to his dominion with which he ruled, for his kingdom will be plucked up, even for others besides these. So Alexander's kingdom is temporary on the earth and is being used by Yahweh for a specific person. Alexander's dominion failed when he died at the age of 32, and 4 generals divided the kingdom between them. You had Ptolemy taking Egypt, Seleucus taking Asia, which included Persia, Cassander took Macedonia and Greece, and Lysimachus took Thrace and that part of Asia Minor. Now, these 2 regions prophesy and speak of Ptolemy and Seleucus. But notice these are the only 2 kings of the 4 who are mentioned in Scripture. The other 2, Cassander and Lysimachus, are not important to Yahweh's pattern and narrative. They don't have anything to do with what he's doing, with what Yahweh is doing. Only Seleucus and Ptolemy are being used by Yahweh because Israel is in the middle of them. Daniel 11:5, the king of the south, that's Egypt, will be strong. One of his princes will become stronger than him and have dominion. His dominion will be a great dominion. So the king of the south, the Ptolemaic dynasty, was Egypt. It will show how the pattern persists and sees a resurgence today. And again, I'm going to show you how Egypt, even though we don't see Egypt doing much, Egypt is a part of what's happening today. Iran is the remainder of the Persian Empire, and it was also part of the Seleucid Empire. So really, when we say Iran is the remainder of the Persian Empire, we should include that it was part of the Seleucid Empire. And verse 5 says that one of his princes will become stronger than Ptolemy, the king of the south. Now, that Ptolemy, whose name stuck on the Egypt-centered southern kingdom, was strong at first, but one of Alexander's princes or generals became stronger than Ptolemy. So, Ptolemy comes out of the gate and he is stronger than Seleucus, the king of the north, whose name got stuck onto the northern Middle East Empire in that period, even though other men would rule after Seleucus. His name stuck and Ptolemy's name stuck. So then there became this back and forth struggle to overcome each other's empires. This is a struggle still today, though most people don't recognize it because it seemingly ended when the Roman Empire conquered both the king of the south and the king of the north. Here is where Daniel 11:40-45 comes in, because in the end of days, the ancient Seleucid Empire, under the auspices of Iran, with the help of Russia and China, those are political realities of our day, and no longer named Elam or Persia, will finally capture and retain the king of the souths, the Ptolemaic region, and will thus control the entire Middle East and Northern Africa, I should have added in here, for the first time in history. So I told you in the past that there are many battles that are going to be cleaned up, that are going to culminate in the tribulation. And I've told you there's battles between Jacob and Esau, and between Shem and Ham, and there are battles between the northern kingdom of Israel and the southern kingdom of Israel still going on. All of these battles are going to culminate and come together and get cleared up in the 7-year period at the end of Daniel chapter 29, or chapter 9, not 29. This battle between the king of the south and the king of the north is another one of those battles that has to culminate in the tribulation and be cleaned up and dispensed with. So in other words, the ancient Greek Seleucid Empire will finally win everything that Antiochus IV, who we're going to read about further on, tried to conquer. But his end times reign will be very short. His successor, who will do this thing in the very end of days, will find his reign to be very short, as there will be another empire coming soon after 3.5 years, who will conquer the end-time Seleucid king of the north. That empire is the coming kingdom of Yahweh, ruled over by its God and king, Yeshua. So that's why, the Iran's version of Antiochus IV will be, very short-lived. Nonetheless, it will wrap everything up. Well, because the Ptolemies and the Seleucids could not overcome each other militarily back in that day, they made a political marriage. That's a common thing that happens in Middle East cultures and elsewhere. You got an enemy and you can't overcome them, so let's marry each other. Verse 6, at the end of years, they will join themselves together, and the daughter of the king of the south will come to the king of the north to make an agreement, but she will not retain the strength of her arm. He will also not stand, nor will his arm, but she will be given up with those who brought her, and he who became the father of her, and he who strengthened her in those times. This daughter was Berenice. She and her infant son were murdered through political intrigue, which is too long and not relevant to go into here. Verse 7, but out of a shoot from her roots will stand up, one will stand up in his place, who will come to the army and will enter into the fortress of the king of the north and will deal against them and will prevail. See, Berenice was from the Ptolemaic Empire. She was from Egypt. And so that's Berenice's brother, the king of the south, Ptolemy the third, will also carry their gods with their molten images and with their goodly vessels of silver and gold captive into Egypt. He will refrain some years from the king of the north. So in retaliation, Berenice's brother, Ptolemy III, the king of the south, the one that was out of the shoot from her roots. Who is that? That's her father. Her root is her father. So he's her brother. Attacked the king of the north in retribution for her being killed, which broke the treaty. And he captured various Seleucid fortresses and carried treasures and took idols back to Egypt. Now, this is important for end times prophecy because Daniel 11:43 says the modern day king of the north will have power over the treasures of gold and silver and of all the precious things of Egypt. This is also a retribution fulfilled in the end of days, which comes from that time back there. The northern Middle Eastern Seleucids want their treasure back. Verse 9. He will come into the realm of the king of the south, but he will return into his own land. His sons will wage war and will assemble a multitude of great forces which will come on and overflow and pass through. They will return and wage war even to his fortress. So the king of the north, whose king was Seleucid II, and his son. So Seleucid has now died. He has a son, Seleucid II, and Seleucid II has a son, Antiochus III. Now they're ruling, I guess, the way I'm reading the history is that they were kind of like co-regents. And they together rebuilt and amassed a massive army and attacked the Ptolemaic Egyptian king of the south. But they were not able to conquer Egypt or take back any of the plunder gotten by Ptolemy III. Then comes a new Ptolemaic ruler, Ptolemy IV, many years later. Daniel 11:11, the king of the south, that's Ptolemy IV now. So we've got, three descendants of Ptolemy, will be moved with anger and will come out and fight with him, even with the king of the north, that's Seleucid II, and his son Antiochus III. He, Ptolemy IV, will send out a great multitude, and the multitude of the Seleucids will be given into his hand. The multitude will be lifted up, and his heart, that's Ptolemy IV's heart, will be exalted. He will cast down tens of thousands, but he won't prevail. So Ptolemy IV saw that the Seleucids were expanding their army in the north. And so he made a preemptive strike against the Seleucids, which he won. But Ptolemy IV's victory was temporary. Now, also notice that while this was, I don't know what I was trying to say here, in the middle, Israel was still in the middle. That's what I should have said there. The anger was not toward Israel. It was toward the Seleucids. Israel was simply the fulcrum on a teeter-totter. Israel was not the aim or goal of the kings of the south and north. The armies just trudged through their territories, leaving behind their Greekized, Hellenized ways for the Jews to grab onto. But they were not a military target. Verse 13. The king of the north, the Seleucid Antiochus III, will return and will send out a multitude greater than the former. He will come at the end of the times, even of years, with a great army and with much substance. So this is not saying that this is going to happen at the end of days. It happened at the end of Antiochus III's days, because this was specifically his battle for that time. He returned to Egypt with a much larger, better equipped army, and he defeated the king of the south, Ptolemy V, recapturing the glorious land, which is Israel. But Israel was not yet the military aim or goal. Israel just happened again to be the fulcrum of the teeter-totter, because it was the land which the armies must travel through to get to each other. Verse 14, in those times many will stand up against the king of the south, also the children of the violent among your people. That's among your people, Daniel. Among your people, the Jews, Daniel, will lift themselves up to establish the vision, but they will fall. The Seleucid king of the north made an ally of Philip of Macedon, which was not part of the Seleucid Empire, but they became allies, and then they made their attack to the king of the south. Well, also, some Hellenized Jews in Israel allied with the king of the north. So these were the rebellious children of the violent among your people, Daniel. We call them Jews. These are the children of the violent among your people, seeking greater freedom, they thought, for allying with the Seleucid king of the north. They thought they were going to be, they were going to be freed of what, who knows, probably freed from the Torah, because they were Hellenized. So this particular battle is not playing out prophetically today, because, there are no Jews in Israel who stand with Iran, the end times remnant of Persia and the Seleucid Empire that came out of Alexander the Great's war with Persia. There's just, the Jews are not, they're not particularly fond of Iran, that descendant of Persia and the Seleucids. Verse 15. So the king of the north will come and cast up a mound and will take a well-fortified city. The forces of the south won't stand, neither will his chosen people, neither will there be any strength to stand. But he who comes against him will do according to his will, and no one will stand before him. He will stand in the glorious land, and destruction will be in his hand. So now we're going to begin to introduce destruction in the glorious land, in Israel. The Egyptian general Scopas, who has a hill in Jerusalem named after him, you can go visit Mount Scopas. He was defeated at Sidon, a city in Lebanon, which the Seleucids controlled. But this was not the end of the Seleucid Antiochus III's plans. Antiochus III beat the Egyptian general back, but he now controlled. Well, I just said that wrong. The Egyptian general now controlled the area all the way to the Egyptian border, including Israel. But he did not yet control Egypt. Boy, that see, this is what I mean about the history of this. Antiochus beat back Scopas, but he did not control Egypt. There we go. So he wanted to control, Antiochus III wanted to control Egypt, So his solution to this was another political marriage. It was about 55 to 60 years after Berenice. And he did that with an eye toward taking Egypt that way through intrigue. Now we'll see how this turns out. Verse 17. Antiochus III will set his face to come with the strength of his whole kingdom, and with him equitable conditions, speaking nicely to the Egyptians for making the political marriage. That's what that equitable conditions means. He was speaking nicely to the Egyptians to make the political marriage. He will perform them. He will give them, that's Ptolemy V, the daughter of women to corrupt her, but she will not stand and won't be for him. The Seleucid king of the north, Antiochus III, attempted this political marriage, giving his daughter Cleopatra I, not the famous later Cleopatra. This is the first Cleopatra, in marriage to Ptolemy V. She was called the daughter of women because she was only 11 years old and was still under the care of nursemaids. She, was in a court being cared for by many nursemaids. But this failed even through the equitable conditions he offered, because when it all came to a head, she wanted to remain queen of Egypt. See, after a certain amount of time, she was elevated to be Ptolemy V's queen. She became queen of Egypt. So, from her point of view, helping her Seleucid king of the north father to take power over Egypt through her would have also meant she would no longer be queen. And who wants to give up being queen? And, she might have even been killed by her own father after the takeover, just to, get all the every heir to the throne out of the way and to stop any retaliation for that throne. Daniel 11:18. After this, he, that's the king of the north, Antiochus III, will turn his face to the islands and will take many, but a prince will cause the reproach offered by him to cease. Yes, moreover, he will cause his reproach to turn on him. So Antiochus III, not able to take Egypt militarily or politically, shifted his military campaigns westward out into the Mediterranean after his efforts in Egypt failed. And he also took part of Asia Minor, that's Thrace and Greece and its islands, Samos, Euboea, but still Israel was not a target, but it was being set up to be a target for takeover during this time. Verse 19, then he will turn his face toward the fortress of his own land, but he will stumble and fall and won't be found. The Seleucid king of the North's empire now begins to fail under Antiochus III. He could not conquer Egypt through intrigue or military force, and now Rome is coming into view, and Rome is threatening his empire. Rome took from him all the territory north and west of the Taurus Mountains in Asia Minor, which is those mountains are in modern Turkey's north and west, the northwest part of Turkey today, following Antiochus III's defeat in the Roman Seleucid War of 190 to 188 BC. So they were fighting over this territory for 2 years, and Antiochus III failed. He was defeated. The Romans also turned Antiochus III away from his westward expansion, forcing him to retreat back to his capital, the city of Antioch, which is in southern Turkey. So then he died about a year later in battle, trying to plunder a temple in Elymais, Persia, in 187 BC. So now also Rome was extracting tribute from Antiochus III and the king of the North's Seleucid Empire. And they were short on money. So, Antiochus III thought he would plunder a temple to pay the required tribute to keep Rome from having further incursions into the Seleucid Empire and losing more land. Now, Antiochus III was succeeded by his son, Seleucus IV. He named his son Seleucus IV. But here is where the famous Antiochus Epiphanes IV comes in, because he is also a son of Antiochus III. And he's the one, Antiochus Epiphanes IV, is the one who is known for the abomination of desolation and for targeting and persecuting the Jews. Seleucus IV, the brother of Antiochus IV, reigned from 187 to 175 BC, but he was assassinated by a man named Heliodorus. He was his chief minister, and he seized power for a very short time, but Antiochus IV took back the throne in 175 BC. Verse 20. Then one who will cause a tax collector to pass through the kingdom to maintain its glory will stand up in his, that's Seleucus IV's, place. So there's one that's going to replace Seleucus IV, the son of Antiochus III, and his name is Antiochus Epiphanes IV. But within a few days he shall be destroyed, not in anger and not in battle. So Antiochus IV immediately began taxing the Jews. And this is, remember, I've told you that the decline of the Seleucid Empire was setting up the military incursions into Israel that the former Seleucids had not made and the Egyptians had not made. Immediately when he took the throne, Antiochus IV began taxing the Jews to pay for the Seleucid Empire's debt to Rome. This is why he began targeting Israel, and it is why he was the first of the kings of the south and north to do so. He maximized the empire's revenue by putting the high priest's office up for sale to the highest bidder, which then made the wealthier Hellenized Jews like Jason and Menelaus, who promised higher tributes, wealthier than the biblical high priests. John the Baptist's father, Zechariah, he was in the line. He was in the line to perhaps even become high priest, the biblical high priest. But he refused to buy the office. He wanted to have it passed to him biblically. So this, along with other taxes, led to severe economic pressure in Judea. Now we have in verse 21 the scripture describing the diabolical turn that Alexander the Great's successor, that's Antiochus IV, made. Verse 21. In his, that's Seleucus IV's place, a contemptible person, Antiochus IV, will stand up, to whom they had not given the honor of the kingdom, but he will come in time of security and will obtain the kingdom by flatteries. Why was Antiochus IV not given the honor of the Seleucid kingdom? Well, it's because he was not the rightful heir to the Seleucid throne, any more than the man he killed, Heliodorus, was. Seleucus IV had two sons who were the rightful heirs. But Antiochus IV had seized power by assassinating Heliodorus, and did not have the integrity to give the throne to one of his brother's sons, Seleucus IV's sons. In fact, he had the real true heir, the first son, Demetrius, held hostage in Rome to get him out of the way. The overwhelming forces in verse 22 will be overwhelmed from before him and will be broken. Yes, also the prince of the covenant. The covenant mentioned here is one which had been made between Cleopatra, Antiochus III's sister, and Ptolemy V, who was joined in covenant with the Seleucid Empire. But Cleopatra I was already dead. But rather than keep the treaty with Egypt, Antiochus IV attacked and defeated the Egyptian army. And then it says, after the treaty made with him, he will work deceitfully, for he will come up and will become strong with a small people. So after defeating Egypt, Antiochus IV made a different treaty with the Ptolemies to turn Egypt into a vassal state to the Seleucids. You know, that would have helped pay his debt, his annual tribute, the taxes to Rome. Now, here's where I said I marked this place because if you've been bored and not paying attention, I understand. But here's where you want to wake up because this is where it begins to come down to the end of days. Verse 24. In time of security, he will come even on the fattest places of the province. He will do that which his fathers have not done, nor his fathers' fathers. He will scatter among them prey, plunder, and substance. Yes, he will devise his plans against the strongholds, even for a time. So here we see the first elements of the end times Antichrist prophesied by Daniel, Yeshua, and Yeshua's apostles. He came to Israel to do what his fathers had not done, nor his fathers' fathers. In other words, they didn't attack Israel. He comes to attack. He's going to do what they had not done. Antiochus, the Seleucid king of the north, entered Israel expressly in war. This is the same Antiochus IV that desolated Yahweh's altar. This is why the second he of Daniel 9:27 will be from the modern Iranian king of the north. Iran will follow this Seleucid Antiochus IV's pattern. Daniel 11:25. He will stir up his power and his courage against the king of the south with a great army, and the king of the south will wage war in battle with an exceeding great and mighty army, but he won't stand, for they will devise evil plans against him. Yes, those who eat of his dainties will destroy him, and his army will be swept away. Many will fall down slain. Despite Antiochus' massive efforts and epic battles, he eventually did not stand in Egypt and his army was defeated. That's why he's going to try that again in the end of days. Not the literal Antiochus IV, but one who has his spirit. Now, the reason that he was not able to take Egypt was because of Roman intervention. And this is also indicating to us, little by little, battle by battle, how Rome was spreading in the region. So this is a death knell for the Seleucid Empire and for the Middle East, which will not be repeated again. Once Daniel 11:40-45 happens, Yeshua comes, and there won't be another Roman Empire that rises up again. That's not going to happen. But at that time, that's what happened. Rome intervened. Verse 27. As for both of these kings, their hearts will be to do mischief, and they will speak lies at one table. Boy, we see that today. You know, the U.S. and Israel, or the U.S. and they go to Iran, or they go to some, place, and they're trying to make a treaty. They're just sitting there. Everybody's sitting around that table, just lying through their teeth, aren't they? Back to verse 27. But it won't prosper, for the end will still be at the appointed time. So, Yahweh's got control of this. Even though they're lying to each other, Yahweh is in control, and it's going to happen when he says. You see how we get hope out of this. Antiochus IV and Ptolemy V both lied to each other when they made the treaty. Antiochus planned to rule over Egypt, not to merely make battle and leave. And let's just read the U.S. and Israel here through that 1979 Israel-Egypt treaty. For this is how the U.S. became a political part of the end times remnant of the Ptolemaic king of the South Empire, which will provoke the king of the North. Are you catching on? You see, the politics don't happen just in our day. They have roots 2,200 years ago. In return, Ptolemy planned to defeat Antiochus IV by appealing to Rome to expel him. Daniel 11:28. Then Antiochus IV will return into his land with great wealth. His heart will be against the Holy Covenant. He will take action and return to his own land. So he had gotten himself some plunder in Egypt. So remember the plunder which Egypt had taken from the Seleucids by Berenice's brother, king of the south, Ptolemy III, in Daniel 11:8. But there was still more plunder to take, which will not be taken until Daniel 11:40 to 45 is fulfilled. It mentions it there. It says, Egypt, he will be in control of the silver and the gold and the important things. And in the taking of Egyptian plunder, the wicked thought of destroying the agreement and the bought and paid for high priests, or with the bought and paid for high priests in Israel, came to his mind. He's in battle in Egypt, and now he's thinking, there's treasure in that temple in Jerusalem. I just ought to go and get that. He was not entering Israel with the notion of converting the Jews to worshiping Greek gods quite yet. That would come later. And teaching them to leave Yahweh, that would come later. And teaching them to leave the Torah, that would come later. But his first notion was to go and get that plunder. He wasn't teaching them to leave everything culturally Jewish behind. But there were already Hellenized Jews in Judea. And Antiochus IV may have counted on their power to convince all the Jews to leave Yahweh's ways entirely later on when it came time, for him to destroy Jerusalem. Verse 29, he will return at the appointed time and come into the south, but it won't be in the latter time as it was in the former. So in other words, when Antiochus attacks Egypt again in the future, last time he was able to get some stuff until Rome came in and helped the Egyptians. But this time he is going to still fail to take Egypt. So now keep thinking about the pattern here. The Seleucid and Ptolemaic wars will play out again in our time. The Seleucids, which are Iran today, still want to plunder Egypt. It mentions this, as I have said, when they attack Israel and Jordan. And what in the world is this in the middle of here? Jorland. Oh, goodness sakes. I just don't like that. Okay. So they're going to attack Israel and Jordan and Egypt and a bunch of other countries as described in Daniel 11:40-45. But you see, with all I've just been telling you, Yahweh has established the pattern that will play out in our time. So if we understand this, we'll be able to see what's going on. We won't think that Europe is the king of the north. Daniel 11:30. For ships of Kittim will come against him, therefore he will be grieved and will return and have indignation against the holy covenant and will take action. He will even return and have regard to those who forsake the holy covenant. So the island of Cyprus, Kittim, came to Egypt's rescue. In Antiochus IV's anger, because he had been defeated by the Ptolemaic king of the south and his ally, now Cyprus, and in the last war he had managed to get something, but then the Romans came in and he couldn't get what he really wanted, which was full control of Egypt. Now he's just enraged. And that is what causes him to desolate Yahweh's altar. He turns his attention to Jerusalem. The end-time spiritual heir of Antiochus IV now has reason to be enraged with the king of the south, the U.S., Egypt, Israel axis, doesn't he? Verse 31. Forces will stand on his part, and they will profane the sanctuary, even the fortress, and will take away the continual burnt offering. Then they will set up the abomination that makes desolate. So see the scenario today. The U.S., Israel, and Egypt are the king of the South because of Jimmy Carter's Israel-Egypt treaty, which he facilitated in 1979. The U.S., the facilitator, is also an active enforcer. And because they're the active enforcer of the treaty, they are part of the treaty. The U.S. is part of that treaty. So that this creates now an axis in the end of days, which fulfills Daniel 11:40-45, king of the south. Antiochus IV set the pattern of the Seleucid king of the north, who used to be called Elam, and then was called Persia, and now is called Iran, to come plundering modern Egypt and destroying Jerusalem in the process. This end times Antiochus IV will want to do more damage than his predecessor. Jerusalem will be, yes, because, the trouble in Iran is coming right out of Israel. It's coming right from Netanyahu. And it's coming from Donald Trump. So they're going to want to destroy Israel, but they're also going for Egypt. And I'm going to read you those scriptures. Over time, other factors, since the last 2,200 years, other factors, political factors, like I've just told you, have come into play. So, time always adds to the burdens of the later wars. Verse 32. He will corrupt those who do wickedly because against the covenant by flatteries. But here's the important thing. The people who know their God will be strong and take action. Those who are wise among the people will instruct many. Yet, this describes the tribulation, folks. The people that know their God and the people who are wise, yet they will fall by the sword and by flame, by captivity and by plunder and many days. Now, those people who knew their God and that were wise in that time were the Maccabees. They were the Maccabees. Verse 34, now when they fall, they will be helped with a little help, but many will join themselves to them, to the Seleucids, with flatteries. So it is estimated that Antiochus IV killed 80,000 Jews, took 40,000 more as prisoners, and sold another 40,000 as slaves. Does not that describe Yahweh's people in the end of days? Read the book of, read Matthew 24, Mark 13, Luke 21, and the book of Revelation. He also plundered the temple. Antiochus robbed the temple of what amounts to $1 billion worth of treasuries today. $1 billion worth of treasuries. But the Jews were given a little help in the Maccabees. The number of those who revolted and then actually defeated Antiochus IV was small. Just like the very small 144,000 army yet to be raised, who will help Yeshua defeat the entire world. That's what they are. They are an army he's raising up. And when the 144,000 rise up, the implication is, this is Israel. We're back. You get it? You get the association between the Maccabees and the 144,000? Goodness sakes, I hadn't even thought of that until now, and I'm getting goosebumps. Verse 35, some of those who are wise will fall, to refine them and to purify and to make them white, even to the time of the end, because it is yet for the appointed time. So here we have a first mention of something that's going to be to the time of the end, which is where we are. Our own coming persecution will refine and persecute us, or purify us, rather. We'll be refined and purified through what's coming. 2 Maccabees chapter 7 is the account of a mother, Salomia, and her 7 sons who were tortured and killed in front of her, one by one, slowly and deliberately, while she tearfully encouraged them to stay true to Yahweh. It is this family and others like them who were persecuted and killed by Antiochus IV, which this verse refers to, who are the type and shadow of our martyrs yet to come, the church of Smyrna in Revelation chapter 2. Now, Paul refers to Antiochus IV in 2 Thessalonians 2:4, when he talks about the Antichrist who will exalt himself above God by sitting in God's temple. Verse 36, the king will do according to his will. He will exalt himself and magnify himself above every god. That's the Antichrist. That's the Seleucid, Iranian, Shiite Antichrist. And he will speak marvelous things against the God of gods. He will prosper until the indignation is accomplished, for that which is determined will be done. He won't regard the gods of his fathers, or the desire of women, or regard any god, for he will magnify himself above all. So Antiochus IV has set the pattern for the end times Antichrist, who will sit in the temple showing himself to be God. Now, Antiochus IV never sat in the temple. Paul prophesied that his end time successor will sit in the temple, but this person will not be a Jew. This will be an outsider from the Shia of Iran. Why won't this be a Jew? Because Jews today believe the Messiah is only a man and not God. And they're not going to put up with another Jew coming to them and saying, well, I'm your God, like Yeshua did in the first century. So the one that puts himself in the temple cannot be a Jew. That's why I say Daniel 9:27 has two different he's, two different men. Now, the desire of women, he won't regard the desire of women, is actually a reference to, it's a roundabout reference to Yeshua. Because the desire of women, especially in the couple of 100 years or the 100 years before Yeshua, by Jewish women, by Jewish virgins or maidens, and the kingdom was waiting for the birth of Yeshua, the Messiah. All these women wanted to be the mother who gave birth to the Messiah. That's the desire of women, to be the one who gives birth to Yeshua the Messiah. So there was an expectation among Jewish maidens of possibly being chosen as the one. The desire of women was for this. Verse 38, but in his place he will honor the God of fortresses. He will honor a God whom his fathers didn't know, with gold and silver and precious stones and pleasant things. He will deal with the strongest fortresses by the help of a foreign god. He will increase with glory whoever acknowledges him. He will cause them to rule over many and will divide the land for a price. Without going into all the history of Israel, there were divisions that happened in the land of Israel. But the God of fortresses, that was not Zeus, as some scholars think. Antiochus disregarded the gods of his fathers. Zeus was already worshipped by the Seleucids, his fathers. Verse 37 says Antiochus the fourth worshipped none of the Seleucid deities. He honored some unknown deity of warfare, which is still not identified today. I didn't do a thorough search, but I did a cursory search of who this deity could be, and ain't nobody that I've seen so far can tell us who that deity was. So really the meaning of this likely also just refers to Antiochus IV putting his faith in chariots and horses, as God says don't do that in Psalm 20 verse 7. The nations now warring in the Middle East are putting their faith in military hardware, chariots and horses, aren't they? They're not putting their faith in Yahweh. They're putting their faith in iron domes and THAAD systems and that kind of thing, and bombs, and that's where their faith is. Verse 40. Now here comes the king of the south and the king of the north end times battle. At the time of the end, that's now, the king of the south, that's Egypt, U.S. and Israel axis, will contend with him, and the king of the north, the remnant of the Elam, Persian and Seleucid empire, which is now Iran, will come against him like a whirlwind, with chariots, horsemen, ships. He will enter into the countries. Daniel doesn't know what the countries are. He just says countries. And will overflow and pass through. The U.S., Israel, and Egypt today are the king of the south. Why? I've already explained this, but I will do it again here. It has to do with Egypt as the central part of the political axis in Daniel 11, right here. The minute that Jimmy Carter facilitated and witnessed the signing of the Egypt-Israel peace treaty on March 26, 1979 in Washington, D.C., he set the stage for associating the U.S. and Israel with the ancient Ptolemaic Empire, Egypt, which has battles that are not yet finished. Those battles have one more round, according to Daniel 11:40-45. So the pattern was set in Daniel 11. Two factions created by two of Alexander's generals after his death have been going at each other since he died all the way to today. This is just one factor in the wars between the Elamites of Genesis 14, which later became the Persians, which later became the Seleucids, and then became the Iranians. The first factor was when the Elamites put together a coalition with other nations in the northern part of the Middle East, the same territory where the Seleucids and the Iranians now sit. Abraham drove his army from the south. He wasn't in Egypt at that time, he was in Israel, but he drove his army up from the south to retrieve Lot and the plunder that they had taken from kings located in Israel and Jordan. Do you see how the pattern was established even in Genesis 14? It continued through the Persian Empire and into the Seleucid and Ptolemaic empires. Yahweh used Alexander the great horn of Daniel 8:8, to let the pattern play out into the end of days, after which Yeshua will just come and wrap it all up. You see? Verse 41, he will enter also into the glorious land, and many countries will be overthrown. But these will be delivered out of his hand: Edom, Moab, and the chief of the children of Ammon. Edom and Moab are in Jordan. And the chief of the children of Ammon will be all that escapes from Ammon. So if you're in Amman, you might just want to get out of there, because the Route 15 that comes down out of Amman, it's a straight shot down to Saudi Arabia, and it bypasses Edom and Moab, but it's the route for the Shiite king of the north to go and finally take the caliphate away from Saudi Arabia, from Mecca. He will also stretch out his hands on the countries. Again, Daniel doesn't know who the countries are, but he says the land of Egypt won't escape. He, that's the king of the north, will have power over the treasures of gold and of silver, that plunder that he's trying to get back, and over all the precious things of Egypt. The Libyans and the Ethiopians will be at his steps. But news out of the east and out of the north will trouble him, and he will go out with great fury to destroy and utterly to sweep away many. Now that is him going out around the world. He's going to persecute. Who is he going to persecute? Sunnis. 10 times the Sunnis have had the caliphate. 3 times when the Shiites got the caliphate, the Sunnis came along and plucked it up. Remember, Daniel talks about that, about the beast that has the 10 horns and then a little one comes up. And Daniel said that 3 of those horns were plucked up. Well, that's describing what's going to happen here. He's going to go out and he's going to persecute people, Sunnis and Christians. Christians won't convert to Islam, and many of the Sunnis are not going to convert to Shia Islam. So they're going to get killed. Verse 45, he will plant the tents of his palace between the sea and the glorious holy mountain. That's Jerusalem. So he's now got control of Jerusalem. yet he will come to his end and no one will help him. So, in the end of days, the Egyptian axis of the U.S., Israel, and Egypt will again provoke the king of the north, as they are now doing, Daniel 11:40. The remnant Iranian, Seleucid, Persian, Elam Empire will act decisively and will conquer the entirety of the Egyptian Ptolemaic Empire, which includes territory no longer within Egypt or the Middle East. That territory that is not within Egypt or the Middle East is the United States, the one that made this evil axis. The U.S. is outside the Middle East. Now, today, Iran has two huge allies, China and Russia. Guess who is going to attack America when Iran attacks Israel and Jordan and all the countries here in the Middle East? Keep this in mind when you think Daniel 11:40-45 will be contained just in the Middle East, for it will not. But here we go. We have read the end of the book, Revelation, and we will be blessed for reading that book, the book of Revelation, for it it does not matter what happens to us. It no longer matters what happens to us. We're blessed. If we die, we will be with Yeshua. If we live, we will be with Yeshua. So Yeshua will prevail over all his enemies. Hallelujah. And I know this went a little long, but I hope you're still in here with me. Amen. And I'm going to shut this down. And I'm going to go to my, where are you, WebEx? Goodness gracious, I can't get back to WebEx. Let me try this again. Everything has disappeared. Oh, there it is. Okay, good, I'm back. All right, now I went long. Okay, Dawn, go ahead.
Very interesting and so much. And I agree with you. You did a great explanation of the King of the North and the King of the South and all of the history. And I love the history. And thank you for doing all that research. I know that had to be super time consuming. And I just have a couple questions just to kind of I don't know, just kind of map out or talk out with you. I'd like to add in Daniel 2's statue just to kind of throw some other ideas out there too. And I agree with you. I think we're in the times of the King of the North and the King of the South, and I think you did a great job on that. But the statue of Nebuchadnezzar, that's the statue of, that's actually the whole statue basically is Nimrod's kingdom, right? Because if you go way back to the beginning, before the Babylon of Nebuchadnezzar and everything, the first picture that we had of the end times was Babylon, where they wanted to rule the whole earth and build their way to get to heaven, and all of that was all done under Nimrod, right? So isn't he a picture of the very first picture of the one world ruler that will be in the end times? Do you think that?
Yeah, I think all of these, the Lord has dozens, if not hundreds of ways of pointing, here's this symbol, it points there. Here's this symbol. It points there. Where is there? Same place.
Right. Okay, so then Nebuchadnezzar's statue that he saw, he was the head of gold, but I believe that the statue is itself, the entire thing is the one world government, one world end times ruler that actually is represented by Nimrod in the beginning, because you go back to the beginning to see the end. And so Nebuchadnezzar was actually, the whole image was basically Nimrod, because at that time he was the whole world ruler and a pattern for the anti-Messiah. And so Nebuchadnezzar, Babylon, and we're told, the end times Babylon is going to fall. Yeshua's going to be the one that strikes it down. But Yeshua doesn't just strike the head, because the head was just Nebuchadnezzar's Babylon. Yeshua strikes the feet of the statue, because that's the entire statue. That's the entirety of Babylon, which would be Nimrod. Are you tracking with me so far?
Yes, and I have a comment when you're, maybe at the end when you're done.
Okay, well, I just want to make sure I'm explaining it as I go correctly to where it can be understood, because it's really, formed in my brain really good, but I want to make sure that I'm explaining it correctly. So, we are told in Daniel 2 that Yeshua strikes the foot of the statue, which is the end times Babylon. The entire statue is the end times Babylon, and it also represents Babylon throughout history, or the false kingdom throughout history, all of the bad leaders throughout history, because we have Nebuchadnezzar, then we have the Medes and the Persians, and then we have Greece, and then we have Rome, right? So we're in agreement. Gold is Babylon. The silver is the Medes and the Persians. The bronze is Greece, and Rome is the iron, right? And then the iron is mixed with clay at the very bottom, correct? Are we still on the same page?
Well, I don't know.
Oops.
Go ahead.
Okay. So this is just a theory, because I agree that we are in the King of the South and the King of the North. Where on the statue would your historic kings of the South and kings of the North be, right? Where would that be on the statue if we got Babylon, the Medes and the Persians, Greece, and then Rome?
Well, it would be the bronze, right?
The Greece, right?
Yes.
Because they were a split of the Alexander the Great's kingdom, which was Greece. So they were playing down throughout history. The history that you gave and everything was playing down from Babylon was overcome by the Medes and the Persians. Then the Medes and the Persians were overcome by Greece. Then Greece split, and then Greece was overcome by Rome. So that's how the statue goes, right?
Yes, and then Rome split and became the legs.
Right. Yes. And that became like eventually the Ottoman Empire and Europe, right?
No, that became the two
Well, the
versions
East and the
of
West. I mean,
Christianity.
because, well,
That
right,
became the
but Rome,
Byzantine. That became the Byzantine and the Roman empires with the Greek Orthodox and the Latin churches.
okay, I agree, but originally Rome overcame everything that also included what was the Ottoman Empire, because Rome was the Western one, and wasn't it Constantinople over was the Eastern one of Rome, right?
Well, the church actually helped to create Islam, the Roman Church.
Right. Right. Yep. Totally agree. But the Ottomans ended up being the eastern side of the Roman Empire once, right? Because the Ottomans did come to power. But anyway, that's not really that important. So what I'm thinking here is the end times Babylon is what the anti-Messiah rules over. I mean, rules over the entire earth like Nimrod did. So the entire statue, I think, equals Apollyon that we see in Revelation. He comes out of the pit and all of that stuff is so um and so what if history was playing down the statue, Babylon, Medes, Greece, Rome, the mix, and then it goes back up the statue and going back up the statue until we get to Babylon the head, that's the whole entire statue recreated. That's the anti-Messiah. So down at the bottom, Rome then went to become the Christian Empire and all of that. But then out of that, of course, was born the United States, and that was the mix, believers in the clay mixed with the Roman beast. And so then the US became the power in place of Rome, going back up the statue. Now we're playing out the king of the north and the king of the south, which is Greece. And then the Medes and the Persians again, which is basically your king of the north, the Persians, the Iranians, whatever, being the seat of power again in persecution. And then we get to the top again, Babylon, and that's where the entire beast is recreated. So I'm just throwing that out there as a possibly what we should be looking for. And that actually supports your king of the north and king of the south. And then out of that, the Persians temporarily are the winners. But then after that comes the actual anti-Messiah that rules the entire earth. And we don't know exactly what that's going to look like yet, but that's the entire beast. That's Apollyon coming back out of the pit. I don't know. It's just a theory because I think that the statue in Daniel 2 is super important to understanding the events because they happened exactly in that order throughout history, going down to the feet. So what if they're playing out at the end, going back up to recreate the entire statue? So anyways, that's just something to ponder. And I think that, ultimately, and it's just something that I always believe that the whole statue, of course, is a picture of the end times Nimrod because he's going to be ruling the whole earth, which that statue encompasses all the kingdoms of the earth throughout history and all the wicked leaders, like you said. And the end time leader, I think, we're going to be able to see all of those wicked leaders that you outlined contained in one person, the end time person. All of those attributes are going to go to him because that's the beast, the statue is representing the entire statue. So go ahead and I'm sure that you have thoughts on that and I'm very interested to hear them, but that's just a theory I'm throwing out there.
Well, the head of Nebuchadnezzar's statue has never stopped being the head. That statue has
Right.
not ever been able to stop planning the next phase. Like it finally came down to the head of gold creating the silver, the Persian Empire. And then when that failed, the head of gold and the silver became the bronze, the Greek. And then you have the legs that split in two. That's the Roman Empire, but I don't see the feet as part of the Roman Empire. The feet are the end times beast of Revelation 13, 1 through 10, the United Nations. And that is the beast that is bringing to us toes that are made of clay and metal. Now, the Bible there says iron, but what do we have today? We have flesh and electronic components, transhumans. That's the feet of the United Nations beast. And Iran today is just part of Nimrod's kingdom. the king, that's Nebuchadnezzar's statue. And so Iran is not the big guy. Iran is just going to be playing his part in all of the factors that are coalescing for the last 7 years.
That is excellent. You just added something that is just excellent. I love that you said the base was man and technology together, and that came after Rome, after the US, if you're going down too. I mean, but so Babylon, it started out gold, and as you went down the statue, the metals got baser and baser and weaker, right? Correct?
Well, I think that's obvious.
Okay, so if you go now, they're rebuilding Nimrod's kingdom, the beast, and they're starting at the bottom, at the base, and rebuilding it upon man and technology. So then if you're building the base of this end times Babylonian beast on the bottom, the base, which is weak because it's mixed man and technology, but you're building back up to the head of gold, and Babylon, Nimrod ended up making a whole statue of gold of himself that was supposed to represent the end time Babylon that everybody's going to have to bow to. But the base that they're making this new end times Babylon on is, like you said, the clay and the iron, or the clay and the metal, the technology and the man mixed together. That's what they're building this end time beast upon, that base. And that's the base that Yeshua is going to come and destroy and make the whole thing fall down at the end. So that's really cool because they're trying to build it back up on a base of what you said, clay mixed with metal, or technology mixed with man. That's really cool.
Well, the way I see it is that it's not that they have to build it back up. They've had to keep it hidden. They've had to hide that statue. It's been working behind the scenes. It's not like you have to go back up the ladder, so to speak, to go from the feet back up to the head. It's that son of perdition has to be revealed, and he will be revealed all at once.
Well, I think what I'm saying is built back up is replaying. Like you said, we have these historic things that played down the statue. And so then we're looking at that pattern to play back up the statue. So when I say rebuild the statue, I mean the history that we're watching take place is going back up the statue. So through technology, they're using, like, you've got the technology in man. Now we're back up to Greece. The king of the north and the king of the south are using this technology, but we can see the patterns play out just as they did. And so the next pattern is the Medes and the Persians. Then the next pattern is the ultimate Babylon. So when I say build back up, I'm not saying that it was ever gone. I'm saying the patterns working their way back up based on a base of this technology and man mixed together that we've seen for the first time in history.
Well, where in the Roman Empire do you see any of the Roman Empire playing out in the end of days?
Well, if you have, so when did this technology start? It started after the United States was the world power, right? I mean, you have to admit we're like the world power, but we also, if you're going back up, you go down, we came out of Europe. Then we connected back to Europe, going back up in the United Nations, or NATO, I'm sorry, NATO. And then we had the United Nations. And then we had the King of the North and the King of the South. And then as you said, out of that, Iran comes the power. And so can you see how it's kind of going backwards now? It went all the way down to the United States. Then we got the technology mixed with man. And then the United States made alliance back with Europe after we separated from Europe. So now you're going backwards. We made an after World War II, we may, or World War One, I guess, is sort of when NATO started. We're joining back to Europe and we're doing the process backwards. And then after NATO comes the UN. And then after the UN, as you're saying, the North, King of the North and King of the South, which is where we are, is representative of Greece in the statue. And then after that, you believe that that Iran, which represents the king of the north, is going to be victorious. Well, then you're back up to the Medes and the Persians. And so then ultimately you're headed back up to Babylon, which is the end times Babylon that will rule the whole earth.
Okay.
Includes the Medes, the Persians, the Greece, the Rome. It includes all of them. This end time ruler is going to rule all of them.
Yes, but they don't come back in one at a time like that. The entire statue of Nebuchadnezzar will be in play because the whole system is that statue from the gold head to the feet mixed with clay. It's not, I mean, I see what you're saying, and maybe it's just semantics, because the the head, the Babylon head, the gold head will already be governing when the Iranian king of the north attacks the king of the south. It's not like it happens one thing after another. All of the patterns happen at once.
Well, maybe the golden statue is the hidden Babylonian ruler, the actual entire golden statue. And I think that's the ultimate goal that they are seeking, is to have this ultimate golden statue that is worshipped and is ruling the entire world. That is the goal of these people. That is the goal of Hasatan, is to have the golden statue of Nebuchadnezzar. And they're trying, not consciously, just the pattern is rebuilding from the bottom up in reverse order through the history, leading to the entire thing. But it is still all, I totally agree with you, it's all part of the one statue, but the different parts are the patterns, as you say, that we need to look at through history. So if we follow them in order down and then follow them in order back up, that leads ultimately to the golden statue that they are trying to build, but they'll never get that golden statue actually built because Yeshua is going to come and strike the bottom of this statue, which is weak, and shatter the whole thing before they can actually have their true Nebuchadnezzar golden god, because otherwise no flesh would be saved if they actually got what they really wanted.
Right, and that's why they have to get rid of all of the believers in Yeshua in order so that everyone will be bowing down and worshiping the God of gold. Yeah, I mean, I understand that. I just don't see the patterns going backwards back up to the head. I just see the patterns, all of them coming at there. Each one is like an ingredient in a cake, and you put it all and it's in the entire cake. It's not like you can separate out one part from the cake batter. You just have to know what the ingredients are that's in the cake.
Right. No, I totally agree with you, and I'm not disagreeing at all. I'm just seeing it that this actually, and I probably am the only one that can see this, but it playing backwards, like you said, we are at the Greece level, then the Medes and the Persian level is what I see next, which is what you're saying. They're going to be victorious, but I think they are only victorious temporarily, and out of that victory comes whoever this beast end times Nimrod person is. And it's all based on technology and man mixed together, which is the weak
But
base
see,
that's going to be struck by Yeshua.
maybe I'm misunderstanding you
You probably,
because,
I'm probably not explaining it right.
well, let me tell you what I'm hearing. that after the king of the north, the Greek part, comes the head of gold, which is the Babylon kingdom. But the scriptures tell us that the Babylon kingdom is already operational when the king of the north, because the king of the north is one of the last things that happen. The Babylonian head is already operating, and the son of perdition has already been revealed.
Who do
Because
you think the son of
Antiochus the
perdition
fourth,
already revealed is?
Antiochus the fourth, the one
Well,
that comes like him, because that's the one
right.
that comes and sits in the temple.
Right. He's the one that the pattern of the end is built after. But I see the pattern of the
Right.
end times man is actually built after Titus did the same thing. He came and destroyed the temple and put a pig, or I mean he didn't Titus do another where he desecrated the altar before they destroyed
Well, no,
everything?
he didn't sacrifice a pig. He put a statue of
No, he did.
Jupiter.
There we go. Yeah, that's it. Yeah, so I knew he did it. So we're seeing, I think there's more than just one picture throughout this history of what the end times person is going to be. Um, I think that um, we see several pictures throughout history play out, like Titus, Nero, Antiochus. Antiochus is the main one that's pointed to in the Maccabees, of course, and Yeshua pointed back to him. But then we also see follow ups of that doing the same thing. And I think it's repeated so that we can see that this end time person is going to do all of these horrible things because we're told that it's going to be worse than anything ever throughout history. And
Right.
so I don't think it's just the one picture. I think it's all of those that did those things.
Right. It's all about the repeating patterns. I think
Yes.
that's what you're trying to say. It's the repeating patterns and the elements of the Babylon Empire and the Persian Empire and the Greek Empire and the Roman Empire. And now we have a new empire that is revealing that entire statue, and it has feet of clay and metal mixed together. And so that's where we are right now. But you're right. It's all about the repeating patterns.
Yes, and I think that you've uncovered a lot of the patterns and the pictures and helped us to really think in that even a deeper way in that aspect of looking at these things for these patterns because it's all wrapped up into one statue. And so anyway, I've taken way enough time. I'm sure other people want to talk, so I'm sorry for taking so long and not being able
No,
to
that was
explain what I was saying
interesting.
very well.
No,
Yeah.
that was
Well, thank you.
interesting, and I'm glad you brought that up, because through what you said, we can see how many patterns, uh, you know, they repeat, and Yahweh uses symbolism over here to point to the same kind of ending, and so we just have to be able to recognize the symbols and the patterns for what they are. That was good, Dawn. Thank you. Anybody else? John.
Kimberly, I did not fall asleep, but I did have an interference. The doorbell went, and who was it? It was my next door neighbor. And so I had to pop downstairs. And he and his wife actually, they um, obviously bought some roses and a box of and a cake and a card, bless them, to come over because they are Roman Catholics, to come over and wish me happy Easter. So I had that little interlude where I missed a bit, but the Lord allowed me to come back just to the point when you said that if we fall asleep, you will certainly wake us up, which you did. And so here's my take. Um, Yahweh has established scripturally the pattern as you identified in Daniel 11:30. Also, plus a reference to Genesis 14, where we know the story of Abraham having rescued his nephew Lot from the five kings. So the pattern has been set twofold. And then you obviously went on to talk about the control of Jerusalem, meaning the man who's going to come from the north, he will plunder the gold and silver. Just stopping there a moment, do you think that will be from the third temple? Because by then the third temple would have been built, wouldn't it? The so-called third temple, not the Ezekiel temple, obviously.
You know, that's a good possibility. But I think for this end times King of the North, it's about getting control of the Dome of the Rock and the mosque, the Al-Aqsa Mosque, if those have not been destroyed by Israel beforehand, or if they've been destroyed, he comes for retribution, and then as an aside, he will take the plunder from that temple, this Jewish third temple, to pay for the damages that the U.S. and Israel have done to Tehran and to other places in Iran.
Right. Yeah, and keeping within the type and shadow that was introduced by Antiochus the Fourth, as you explained, of the ancient time, but it will also be manifested in the end of days by a Shiite from Iran, and he didn't worship the gods of the Seleucids, which is his ancestry, and the god was actually set up in the temple. Now we know it was Zeus or Zeus in the ancient times, but could the modern day statue, if you like, could it be the smart supersonic type of warfare and AI entities?
Yeah, well, of course, you know, our world now, the nations all have that kind of technology. I don't think that the Shia Antichrist is going to set up a statue. I think it's going to be their flag, which I described in a couple of teachings ago. You know, that their conquering flag, the flag with the lion
And the
with two wings.
two wings.
Right, that lion has two wings on it.
Oh, right.
And getting back to what Don was saying, you see, that lion with the two wings is the symbol of Babylon.
Yeah.
So there you go, Don. the, it goes, so at the very end, it does go back to ancient Babylon, the head of Nebuchadnezzar's golden, the statue with the head of gold.
Yeah. So keeping with those two wings, you mentioned before that there is this two type patterns, which you mentioned before, and I've just actually added another two in my repertoire because today we talked about in the scriptures about two stone tablets. And we in the past you mentioned I think it was last week or week before, bad figs, good figs, etc. This week you've mentioned the persecutions of both Jews and Christianity. So while you talk, I'm chalking down and making a very good repertoire of all these two patterns. The tribulation has a pattern too. The first part is Jacob's sorrows, and the second part of it is Jacob's trouble, as you identified. So thank you again for these two patterns. Um, isn't it amazing that here we are today in the feast of the week of unleavened bread, and my understanding is that Yeshua was crucified on the Wednesday because he ate his last supper on possibly the twilight on the Tuesday. And therefore, doesn't it seem amazing that here we are so many centuries after, and it's as if we are going back in time. Now we know that Yeshua is seated at the right hand of the Father now. He only went to the cross once. But isn't it amazing that here we are, that, this Wednesday gone would have been the timing that where he was crucified. And in symbolically, he's still in the tomb until very early hours of Sunday morning for resurrection. And that Mary Magdalene was the first person, being a woman, uh, uh, who he chose to appear to after he rose from the dead. That to me speaks of itself, because she effectively became the first pioneer, if you like, to evangelize. And that's amazing, because I think it was Dawn, I think, who read that today. I'm not really quite sure, but as it was read, it that thought came to my mind that we are now right in the middle of celebrating the week of unleavened bread.
Yes. Yes, and let me tell you that this Passover for some reason has been particularly profound for me, and I've been, at sundown on Wednesday night, it just struck me so hard
Yes,
that he was already in the grave at sundown. And then every day I've thought, he's still in the grave, he's still in the grave. And here in about an hour, it will be the dawning of the first day, not a literal dawn with sunshine, but the beginning of the first day of the week, so that he then rises and comes out of the grave. And for me, that's only about an hour away.
yes,
And so it's like I've been tracking with that. It was very profound. I just can't even express it.
yes. For me as well, because on the Wednesday, I kept thinking this would be the very first night that he would spend in the tomb.
Yes.
And I rose again on the Thursday thinking, oh my goodness, my Lord, my Savior would have been there. Uh, uh,
In the tomb.
yes, in the tomb, thinking,
I know.
what?
So it's not just me. I'm glad to know that.
And the air was still as well. And I read the book of Mark, I think it was 15 and 16, where, the whole process of him saying that here comes the betrayer, and he was taken prisoner, and that would have probably gone on all during the night and early hours of the morning, with the elders of the law, of the so-called law, and then of course taken to the palace, and then being asked, are you the king of the Jews? And then he said, you said so. And my mind was going through all the process of how, he was beaten and spat upon and then crucified on the third hour, which would have been 9 o'clock in the morning, and then being there on the cross in the hot sun. And then he was or is the creator of the whole of this universe, this world, etc. And all the waterways, the streams, the the rivers and springs, etc. And when it was time for him to have a drop of water, they gave him vinegar, and that just brought tears to my eyes, and it was very profound, as you say, thinking about this is the time, this is effectively the time, and we are obviously right into the middle of it this year. Anyway,
Yes,
um,
yes.
the teaching today about the patterns of the king of the south, provoking the king of the north, the Ptolemaic versus the Seleucid empires, and then you went through the history, and then I had a little bit of a break there when my next door neighbor came, but I picked up from where you talked about how, the identification, if you like, the politics today, or where the roots have come from. In Daniel chapter 11, that he came to attack Israel, what his father had not done before, meaning it's the same spirit of the Antiochus IV will be the Iran's pattern. So again, all that was very, very profound. Kimberly, so thank you again for the explanations. One thing you did say, I hope this is not any controversy, but I'm sure you will be able to help me there. You did say, if we die, we will be with Yeshua. Only this morning, I don't know for what reason, at all, I was thinking of the rich man and Lazarus. Lazarus was in the bosom of Abraham, and that was in Luke chapter 16. And presumably that's annotating the place where he went, Lazarus, when he died. But there is another scripture that came to mind at the same time that says that, and many who sleep in the dust of the earth will awake, some to everlasting life, but others to shame and everlasting contempt, which is in the book of Daniel, chapter 12. So when you said this, we will be with Yeshua, and I have those two scriptures I mentioned, in the bosom of Abraham and sleeping in the dust of the earth. Can you refine the thoughts that I have kind of racing through my mind?
Well, I don't know all the thoughts racing through your mind, but
The ones I've just talked about.
when we die, we're sleeping, and we get resurrected, we get awakened.
When?
Well, the first resurrection happens at the last trump.
Right. So
And the
during that
second
period.
resurrection happens at the end of the 1,000 years.
Okay, so
And that's the one where, God decides you're in, you're out.
okay, so let me just say, for instance, uh, we are sleeping in the dust until that first resurrection. It's like going to bed and
Right,
you don't know a thing until you wake up afterwards.
right,
I would imagine that's how it is. In other words, time has elapsed and
right.
you don't know how many minutes or hours or whatever it is or years.
Exactly, exactly. And
Oh,
so Lazarus was in the bosom of Abraham. That is a Jewish idiom for the place where the souls sleep. So Lazarus was sleeping.
Okay. So when you sleep, you either go to that place or to the other divide, in other words, until that first resurrection.
Yes.
So it's not really just being in oblivion, in a state of not knowing whether you are alive or not,
Right.
but
But
you have gone into two
you've gone
places.
into John, you've gone into a place that is protected by Yeshua. You are now in his house, in your bed, in his house, and you're sleeping. You're getting some rest. You know, you've had a life. It's been busy. It's been overwhelming. It's been full of troubles. You lay down and you go to sleep for whatever amount of time there
Mm,
is. He said there's a great gulf. The book of Enoch.
yes.
Enoch describes a great gulf between the two holding places, the two places where souls sleep when their bodies die. And so where we go, those who die with our faith in Yeshua, we go to that place where he just takes us and he puts us in bed and covers us up, and it's a place in his kingdom where we're safe there.
Yeah, I was wondering, whether we have consciousness or unconsciousness. Because when you're sleeping, you're virtually unconscious.
You're unconscious when you're sleeping. You dream, and I don't know, I've never been settled on whether people in that state will have dreams.
Mm,
I think it's a very deep sleep where you're not dreaming, but I'm not sure.
mm,
But that's that really deep sleep that human beings need to really get rested and
yeah,
to revitalize. That's when the body heals. That's deep sleep is probably when the soul
yeah.
heals as well. So I would think we would not be dreaming during that time. But I know that from the descriptions in the scriptures that place where believers go is already in God's kingdom. We are already in his house. It's like, because we are his children. You don't put your children outside your house in order for them to sleep.
No,
They sleep in your house.
I was just wondering, when you attend funerals, as recently I last couple of weeks, my opposite neighbor passed away. But mind you, she was 87 anyway. But I was just wondering, you hear people say, "Oh well, she's with the Lord now." It's something I refrain from saying, only because I'm aware of the fact that we sleep in the dust of the earth, or we are sleeping effectively.
Yes.
When you
Well,
say to someone, she is with, or he or she is with the Lord, it's kind of impute or inferring that
yeah,
that
like how
person,
do we know, right?
yeah, but nobody's been to come back and let us know, you see.
Right.
So we have to just think of this ourselves, and that's the little dilemma. But the most assuring thing is that if you've accepted the Lord, you are safe. But sometimes, people ask you a question, where do we go? And it's good to know the scriptural basis of what is written. It is written to be able to let them know and not mislead them. That's why
Right. Yep.
maybe I'm asking the question.
Yep. Well, John, our bodies are like a clothes. Okay, we have this example already in life. Our bodies, we put on clothes every day.
Yes.
When now this is not trying to be personal, but when we lay down, we take off our clothes. And we may put on other clothes, but that's irrelevant.
Mm,
So our body lies in Sheol, in the grave,
Yes.
And our soul is separated from our body, and it lies in the place where either we've accepted Yeshua and we're going to be resurrected in the first resurrection, or in the other place where we're just waiting to be judged. So when either of those resurrections happen, the soul is actually rejoined with the body, and it comes out of the grave, just like getting out of bed.
Just on that point, may I raise this? I have heard that the Jews think that when you are sleeping, that your soul has left your body, and that when and that when you and that when you
When the soul leaves the body, you're dead.
but you know what I'm going to say, that in other words, that when you wake up, it means that your soul has returned back.
Yeah.
Have you heard anything
Yeah.
like that?
Well, Paul warns us about not listening to fables, but when people die, we don't know. We can't judge and say, well, they're with God now, with Yeshua, or what we can say to people is, well, they are at rest now.
Okay, maybe that's why the word, RIP, rest in peace. Perhaps that's
Yes,
what
yes.
it means, rest in peace. Yes. Okay. Well, Kimberly, thank you so much again for a wonderful thing and wonderful teaching. And presumably you're going to put this out again on your podcast
Yeah, by Tuesday.
by
The
Tuesday.
Sundays and Mondays are always very, very busy for me. I usually can get them out by Tuesday.
Okay, then great. Thanks so much again.
You're welcome. Julianne.
At first, I only had a comment about what you and Don had spoke about, but then John um, reminded me of what happened to me on Wednesday night. Of course, I realized, oh, his body's in the grave. And then I think it was Thursday early morning while I was in bed sleeping, I thought, oh, I wonder what my father's doing right now. What did he do? And so I wanted to read the next morning whenever I got up, and I found First Peter 3:17 or 3:19. It states what he did, and I wanted to make sure I got the words exactly right. And it says, "By whom also he went and preached to the spirits in prison." So I was like, he didn't yell, he didn't rebuke, he preached the word to the spirits in prison. And in verse 20, it says, who formerly were disobedient when once divine long suffering waited in the days of Noah, while the ark was being prepared, in which a few, that is, 8 souls, were saved through water. So I found that interesting because my comment for Don and you were about Genesis and these spirits, which are otherwise known in the book of Enoch as well as watchers. So when I go back to Genesis 14, which you brought up in your teaching, in verse 5 and 6, it talks about the kings that Abraham traveled towards southward, first conquering 3 tribes. And the first tribe was the Rephaim, and the other one was Emim. And they're stated as very tall people who were destroyed by the Israelites under Moses, which kind of ties in to what my thoughts were with you and Don about the base of the statue, the mixing of the clay and technology, man and iron. And so it brings me back to the pattern where the book of Enoch describes the watchers teaching humans forbidden knowledge, including weaponry, astrology, cosmetics. And this technology led to the widespread wickedness and corruption, which then became, the flood, why the flood happened and had to wipe out everyone. So it was the mixing of these watchers and what they did with man kind of is a template for me, and the base of that statue of the mixturing that we see now is the technology and man,
whereas before the flood, that in a way was also happening. So those were my thoughts and the patterns that sprung up from your history lesson that was on steroids. So I was writing really fast, but thank you for the history lesson as well. But those were a few of my thoughts.
Those are good thoughts, and I'm glad to hear that you and John and maybe others in this room and maybe others around the world were feeling the profoundness and tracking with Yeshua being in the grave every day. I don't think I've ever done this before, so that was good to know. Thank you, Julianne. And Dawn, back to you with, my thought is that when Iran takes Temple Mount, they're not going to put a statue up there because, statues are not allowed in Islam, images. And they're not going to sacrifice a pig because they don't sacrifice pigs. They sacrifice goats and sheep. So they're not going to be doing that because on Temple Mount, that's already what's been sacrificed. So they're going to plant that Babylonian flag of conquering, which then brings it right back up to standing with and confirming the head of gold. Okay, so Babylon. So we had that in this teaching. It's where Daniel in this teaching, or was it the angel? I don't know which one it was, but he said in verse 1, I stood up to confirm and strengthen him. Now, he was referring to Darius, the Mede, but that flag will stand up to confirm and strengthen the head of gold that's already in existence. That was my thought. What do you think?
No, I think that's a good thought. I think those are just patterns that maybe were physical examples of spiritual things that will be placed within people because what they want is our allegiance and worship of their entire system, their entire statue, all of Babylon. So it's not just going to be bow down to the statue. It's not just going to be eat this pig. It's going to be all of the above. You do what we say because we are God, is kind of what I'm thinking.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that everything that every nation that has come against God is going to have its place in that Nebuchadnezzar statue. All right, anybody else? Okay, well, then I guess we can end our meeting. Does anybody have a prayer request? No? Okay. All right. Well, let's pray. Father, I thank you for this time together, and I thank you for the teaching, and I thank you for all the wonderful comments and different ways of looking at the prophecies. And I just pray that you will bring us all back together again next week. And Father, I do lift up Glenn and Amanda for you to heal Glenn and give him his legs back and to just be their strength and the peace that they have in their ordeal. Father, I also pray for Michael that he will continue being healed. And just be with us as we go out and as we come in, I pray in Yeshua's name. Amen. Okay, everybody, thank you for being here on this Passover Shabbat Kol HaMoed, and Shabbat Shalom to you all.
Shabbat Shalom.
Thank you, Kimberly. Shabbat Shalom, everybody.
Shabbat Shalom.